Hello, everybody. Welcome to Minutes with Ming here. This is your host, Ming Lee Chow. I'm here with two guests this week with Bryson McLachlan and Marcus Madalena. I hope that you guys will like it because I think this podcast is going to be extremely interesting for you guys to listen to and chew over the implications, per se. Nice to meet you guys.
How you doing, Ming?
Hey, Ming.
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Great, thank you.
Pretty good. Thanks for having us on today.
Um, yeah. So guys, how did we meet? Like a really interesting question. Like, how did we actually meet?
So, I guess I'll start. We all met in university, probably right when we started. We all lived in the same residence, and Ming and I, anyway, were in the same program. And so we spent a lot of time together when we were in school. We never lived together. We talked about it a couple of times, but
Mm.
yeah, we met probably the first week we were at university. I remember before meeting you, the 1 week of my life at school before Ming. I just remembered you being this crazy guy that lived on the floor above us.
Yeah. And also, like, remember my books? I don't want to name these books, but remember two of my sequels that
I
went over
do.
the dorm?
I do. They were a little bit graphic for this platform.
Yeah. But I don't know who has it anymore. I hope someone still has it and stuff.
We probably met like within the first couple days of like first year, first term, because Marks and I were like four doors down from each other on the
Yeah.
same wing of the same residence.
Mm.
And I mean, even though we were in different programs, I was in different programs than you two. We all shared like the same sort of three buildings there. So
Mm.
we certainly saw a lot of each other over the. Well, for me, it took me 5 years to graduate, but for the 4 years, we were all there.
Good old St. Paul's. So many things happened at St. Paul's during the time. Oh, and then we were in like basketball intramurals and soccer. Well, me and Marcus were in soccer,
Yeah,
but
I forgot you played for our basketball team for a year or
yeah.
two.
I think it's for 1 year, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember one play, probably I don't know about the defining moment of Ming's basketball career, but I've pretty well encompassed how you play, which was you were like the kind of defender that probably fouled people a lot, but played really aggressively. And
Yeah.
you stole the ball from, so you were good on defense, but you didn't play organized basketball growing up. So there was just no offensive game. And I remember you stole the ball from the other team's point guard. You ran it out down the other end and looked over your shoulder to see if anyone was behind you and someone was closing in, and you threw it up like kind of a layup, but so hard off the backboard that it came out almost to the free throw line.
I almost scored that time, but I got so angry. I was like, damn.
Yeah, it's not like you never scored. That was just one funny play I remember.
Oh yeah. Hey, remember the one I got a pass and then I not double. I traveled and I actually scored at that point, but I actually traveled. Like if I actually dribbled once, and I would actually be a point.
I don't think I remember that, but that's funny.
Zach was there. Like Zach, he was like he was literally watching me from the side and stuff, and then. And then I traveled before I scored, and I was like, and then for some reason the crowd all cheered, but then the ref was what's it called, the referee was like travel. I was like, I didn't score at that point. Oh, good times.
Those were the days.
Oh my gosh, and then that's when we went our separate ways. Like after second year, we rented out to other people, and like we rent to with live with different people, and then co-op, and here we are.
Yeah. I mean, you two are probably, I've kept in touch consistently with you guys throughout the years for sure.
Mm.
Ming and I, after we finished university, this was probably your first backcountry trip, but you came out to New Brunswick to stay with me for a couple of weeks, and we did some backcountry hiking and just kind of lived out of my car and camped for a couple of weeks. So that was a lot of fun. And Yeah, we've definitely kept in touch through the years. The last couple of years, we haven't seen each other as much, but
Mm. You know,
hopefully that changes this summer.
yeah, hopefully, because me and Bryson were thinking to come down and see you and stuff in my new shiny EV.
Yeah, you just want to show off your Model 3.
Yeah, I know. Love it though. S- Still drives like a champ. So
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't envious.
it's okay. You'll get one, especially when the Model 2 comes out. So so
Yeah, we're
don't worry.
looking like our next vehicle, our
Mm-hmm.
cars are both getting pretty old. Alex's is 15 years old, mine's 20 years old, or almost 20 years old. So,
Mm-hmm.
when we do need another car, that's what it's going to be. Maybe not a
Mm.
Model 3, but an electric vehicle for sure.
Mm. I would the look for the Model 2 when it comes out at the end of this year. They're gonna be
Yeah.
mass producing it, so I would say because it's $25,000 USD, so it will probably be around $30,000 Canadian. So
Cool.
with the $5,000 grant, if Trudeau is still in power, uh, it's $25,000 Canadian. So let's see how that goes and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've looked at it on and off for a couple of years. I know, Ming, we've had this
Yeah.
conversation several times, but the big thing for us is the only big drive we really do at all is going to the cottage in the summer. And it's from where we live, it's across the GTA. It's about 5.5 hours, and it's just outside the range that
Mm.
any of the EVs on the market right now will do. So we'd either have to sort of dive down into Toronto or stop in like Orangeville or Peterborough area to charge.
Mm.
So ideally, if there's something with a slightly longer range, like if we wait 2 years and that's expanded, that would be perfect.
Yeah. Like I would think that the longest range right now is the Model S long range. I'm sorry, the Model 3 long range for any kind of like cheaper price point wise. And that's like 60, at least like 65K Canadian stuff without the government benefit
Oh
and stuff.
yeah, way beyond what
So
we could afford for sure.
yeah, but Carly, like I was discussing with Carly. She bought a Model Y and she loved it. Actually, like she drove like almost across Canada, and we were talking about it in the podcast before and stuff. And then she absolutely loved it, but there were some kind of heating quality issues. But it was no cost to her, and everything was sort of after and stuff.
Oh, that's good.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think I listened to that version or that episode actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, eventually, let's see how this goes. Like, but I really feel like the COVID has really put a damper on a lot of our summer plans. It's like, because backcountry right now is closed for camping at the moment. Like, but not for car camping, which is weird.
Well, they've opened it up in starting in June, I think. I actually have two trips booked this summer.
Okay.
One is up in your old neck of the woods in Killarney. I'm going to hike the LaCloche Silhouette Trail
Mm.
with a couple friends. And then later in August, maybe it's the first week of September, do a week of canoeing in Algonquin. So,
Mm.
both pretty relaxed trips. I'm just looking forward to getting out and doing something outside of around town.
Mm. That's true. COVID put a damper on everything. I feel like
Yeah,
peop the people that got hurt the most was small businesses, and you know COVID for rapping in the States and the NBA, that kind of like put a dampening on a lot of our teams and stuff. Like, like, well, the NBA is not doing so well because a lot of people are so injured, and then back to back games. Look at the Canucks, man. The whole team got COVID. Almost pretty much the whole
yeah,
team.
it's scary. And like they passed it on to their families in a lot of cases, and it's not a
Mm.
good situation.
Especially the new variants are more transmissive, and then all of the news that we've been seeing, like younger people are getting sicker and sicker and stuff. It's not very good, and like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm resigned to the fact that we're just going to continue to stay at home and not do anything for the near future. But for
Mm,
us, that doesn't change much. That's what we've been doing for the last year or so.
mm,
And
that's
just
Yeah,
do
true.
what you can as an individual. And That's really all we can do right now.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. But but then NBA, yo man, do you know who's the most NBA prone guy? Like the injury prone guy due to COVID? I think it's Kyrie. Remember he went to a freaking party?
Yeah, he just took 2 weeks. He just took 2 weeks off.
Like, how'd you do that? Like, how can you take, because you're getting paid to pay to play, and then you took 2 weeks off to party, and then you got COVID, and then the whole team suffers because of you.
Yeah. Now I understand that part of that, and Kyrie is also very vocal about supporting social justice issues.
Mm.
But I mean, far be it for me to criticize someone for the way that they do that. But I think as a professional athlete with a platform to talk about that, there's better things to do than to just screw off for 2 weeks and tell the media you're not talking to them.
He got injured when people need him the most. The
Yeah.
playoffs are coming up, and
he's had to basically like run that team alone for the last few weeks, and he's not a guy with like a track record of too serious of an injury, but like you take on that kind of workload when you have your other two stars sitting out, and it's like you don't want to say it's inevitable, but it's perhaps not surprising to see a guy who season after season has been asked to carry just like an immense load for a team. And it's unfortunate timing for them because Durant came back like, just one game ago, right as Harden got hurt. So they're just kind of playing like swap in, swap out with their three stars. We haven't even really seen the kind of the three-headed dragon, if you will, at full strength.
The
Yeah,
true
absolutely.
capabilities. Mm-hmm. That
To be able to just swap in another superstar, though.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily feel
player.
bad for the Nets, but they're going to be scary in the playoffs. It's been a tough year to be a Raptors fan. I'm following a lot of other teams more than I have before.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about COVID impacts on teams, and I think obviously there's the immediate real life health effects. But for a team like the Raptors, they have to play in Florida in an arena that's not their home arena in front of fans that aren't their home fans. And this is coming from a guy who's a pretty big Raptors homer, but you see it being kicked around on Twitter quite a bit. People just blaming Florida, blaming the Tampa situation for how bad the Raps have been this year.
Well, and you compound that with, before the All-Star break, they were up to fourth in the East. They were at 500, one game above. I don't remember exactly, but then 4 of their 5 best players got COVID and missed significant periods of time, and they went on a 9-game losing streak. I mean, that kind of says it right there, especially a team that's not that deep. You lose your entire starting lineup.
Yeah. Should have brought Lim back.
Well,
I don't know if he's the difference maker.
I don't know, but like Van Fleet has been like, I've been wanting to get him on my fantasy team for the longest time. Yes, I understand.
We know.
The first couple of days, with just trolls and stuff, So give him, but I'm sorry, Ian, but no. But it's been just trolls, just troll exchanges of like me giving up my worst players and stuff.
So for people that are unaware, the 3 of us are, along with some others that we know, are in a fantasy basketball league together. And Ming is the manager who, when he doesn't draft well and has a bad season, he totally checks out. And when he drafts well and has a good season, he's probably the most engaged manager in our league.
You made a good point, Marcus, about with the season the Raptors have been having. It's been a little harder to kind of follow along. I found my attention has drifted to other teams that have been a bit more pleasant to watch. But the one thing about this pandemic and having so much time at home is I've paid more attention to our fantasy league than I ever have before. It could be because I'm just in front of a computer all the time. But this is probably the best season we've had in terms of just general engagement across the board, and it's been definitely a source of consistent entertainment, whether it's Ming offering up just like insane trades
Oh yeah,
or him shattering everyone's expectations.
The play section.
Oh yeah.
So I've been watching that a little bit, but anything else, or reading the speculation and the stats and stuff, like is he a good keeper or not, like blah blah blah. that kind of, but not really. Just like, my famous quote is, get the points, win the scoreboards. That's my favorite.
You should actually watch. Like, if you're, I mean, I don't know what you've been doing with all this time off from work during your off rotation, but I mean, if I had no work to do all day, I mean, you're doing the podcast, but I would definitely be watching all the basketball.
Oh yeah, I do a lot of like research on like other things, like EV. Like, I don't know, like just to me, it's like I know that my season's been pretty, but the most important is setting your players. Every That's the most important part, is setting your players.
It used to be even more important. Could win you some weeks, but we've slowly weaned out the managers who get lazy at the end of the season and don't set their weeks. And I think we've got, like I said, kind of the best engagement we have before. For people who
Sure.
haven't played a ton of fantasy, we play in a 10-person category league, and it's each week you're playing against one of the other guys, and it's just endless entertainment. We've got 10 super engaged people and a couple support crew helping us out.
Yeah.
And I find like I've probably talked to Marcus more than ever this year. I think both of us being at home in the pandemic, we're always texting about fantasy and who's injured and who we're streaming that week and what trades Ming's making, why Ming keeps beating everyone. It doesn't make any sense.
When it's going to stop, and it won't.
Well, I don't know, because I feel like right now a lot of my players are GTD for some like minor injuries and stuff, like Superman, like ankle contusions and stuff. That to me is not a good sign going into the playoffs and stuff, because I need, like, my three best players are definitely Kyrie, Drew Holiday, and DeRozan.
No, man, it's Julius Randle.
Julius Randle, and then
who you apparently have some kind of like foresight that none of the rest of us have.
No, sorry,
I don't think anyone expected him to turn into like an MVP, a fringe MVP candidate.
No, but I was saying my guard lineup. So like Kyrie's in guard.
Oh yeah.
Julius Randle. Oh sorry.
Drew Holiday.
Yeah, Drew Holiday, and then DeRozan, my three guard lineup, and then Randall. Now I have Aldridge back and stuff. I give him away, then I got it back.
Drew Holiday just signed that huge extension with Milwaukee, and a lot of people were pretty critical of it. But I think if you've owned him in a fantasy team this year, you know that's might actually be a pretty well-deserved contract.
Oh yeah,
I have him in a points league, and I mean he's been elite, like some of the best production of his career, best percentages, and that guy is an absolute beast on defense. Like he's a great fit for that Milwaukee team. And at the end of the day, if you're a small market team, you gotta pay to play. And I think they didn't have much of a choice but spend big on him so they can lock up their core for the next 3-4 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the criticism was pretty undeserved because, they did trade a lot of picks for him. And as a small market team that's competitive, if you even have picks coming in, they're going to be in the high 20s. And, those aren't going to be guys that are helping you win a championship in the next 3 to 4 years. So it's a sunk cost, and you have to keep an asset under control like that, right? So yeah, I think that's their core now, for better or worse. Giannis, Middleton, and Holiday.
And it's certainly paid off for Ming in fantasy. I don't know how you did it. I don't know how you did it, man. But you like both Holiday and Randall are two guys that I did not expect to have nearly the seasons they've been having this year. So
so when we're at the picks, I was at work. So Marcus told me how to set picks and stuff. So I just set it based on what I like and what I don't like. And
which for anyone watching is 3-point shooting and points, basically. That's Ming's. The tunnel vision.
Get the points, win the scoreboard. That's my game. I broke it down to first principles. I took an engineering approach.
So it sounds like Marcus should get at least some of the credit if he coached you on how to do the preset
Yeah.
picks.
Well, we probably had like a 2-hour Zoom call going through like basically just showing him how to preset your draft order and stuff. But I did talk to you about if you like certain stats, rank those players higher than their anticipated ranking. Though that said, I don't know if you did that with Julius Randle or if he fell to you, but he's someone that I've drafted before and immediately regretted it. And he's always been one of those players that, they're too good to drop, but not helpful if you're trying to win.
Game. Okay.
They're not. He tends to not be a particularly complimentary player, and then he might get you some good counting stats, but then sink your percentages. But this year he's shooting like 40% from the three or something, like just things that nobody could have possibly predicted.
No,
I'm actually going to look this up right now because I'm interested to see it.
I'm probably over quoting a little bit, but his 3-point percentage is definitely an outlier compared to the rest of his career.
No, you're not, Bryson. 40.08%.
Like that's insane.
That's almost exactly.
Yeah, last season was 27.
I mean, it's not supposed to work like that.
Yeah, is he the most improved player this year?
I kind of think he has to be honest. He's been a solid player for a few years and, putting up solid numbers, but the guy, like, to bump your 3-point shooting percentage 13 points is like almost unheard of. And to give, I think if anything, he deserves most improved for putting a small sparkle of life back in the eyes of Knicks fans who are the most long-suffering fan base in the NBA, and that deserves some credit.
Also, what's the most funniest thing is Carmelo Anthony. I don't know for like a couple of weeks, but after that's a drop. I don't know what happened
because the Blazers' whole roster was injured.
Oh, so he just got minutes per se.
Yeah, he got minutes because CJ McCollum was out, Nurkic was out. I don't remember if anyone else.
Edit this out, so
the magic of iMovie.
Yeah. But yeah, so I was like, I don't know what really happened, but my team has doing really good, and I expected I expected me as top 6, but I never expected to be number 2 and stuff. Like that was my expectation. Like okay. Get in, get to the playoffs, and then see where this takes me and stuff.
Yeah. Well, that said, I wasn't expecting to be first either and be, 2 days away from being unbeaten through the regular season, though I think I'm going to lose this week.
Me too.
Last year, I traded my, I think, first, second, I think I had 1 pick or 2 picks before the 6th round. So I definitely didn't expect to have a competent team this year.
That's the magic of Nikola Jokic.
Yeah,
doing the work of 3 players.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, with the Raptors being, I don't want to say it, but quite frankly, bad this year. I've watched a ton of Nuggets games when they're on. Because people might not think Nikola Jokic is an exciting player, but I think he's very exciting.
He's got the body of a guy who shows up to like random rec league games, but then he just dominates everyone he plays against. The milkman.
He reminds me of a guy, the epitome of Asian efficiency. Like. Asian efficiency means
I've no comment.
Like he reminds me of a guy can do in China where a lot of people triple task and multitask and stuff at work and stuff. So I feel like he's that kind of mindset. Do 3 people worth of work and stuff.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you mean.
Mm-hmm. Just be efficient. Just be super efficient at your job so that you're taking the same time as 2 other people. I call it Asian efficiency, but
Yeah, they've been super fun to watch, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the addition of Aaron Gordon helps them a lot. But I also just love watching Jokic play, especially when there's those 5 minute stretches in the third or fourth quarter where he just decides he wants to score, and will score
Mm.
10 straight points, and they'll be on a 10-0 run or some big run.
It's been pretty fun to see the resurgence of the big man and between like him and Embiid, but true to sort of 21st century style, they're big guys who, aren't always dominating down low. They've got like guard skill sets. Like they're too like
Mm.
there's a play the other night where Embiid took like a 18-foot step back fadeaway jumper. And this is a guy who's like 7'1" and like 250 pounds.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like I could barely believe what I was watching. I was like, these guys are not supposed to be able to move like this. And I mean, I'm not going to say Jokic can move the way Embiid can, but just his skill and his vision is like unbelievable to watch. He does
Oh
things, and
yeah.
you're like, that's not supposed to be able to happen. Like that's defying the laws of basketball.
Like,
Absolutely.
what's his name? Like, he's like taking the two of the best like guard people, and then like the forward people combine everything in one. Like DeRozan. Sorry, like he plays guard, but he plays power forward at the same time. I like
Yeah.
that. I like that versatility. Like I tend to grasp to more people that people does guard duty and forward duty at the same time, so that I can have more place to put them and stuff. The more versatile you are, the more you get to play more minutes because you're good at two more than one thing, and that makes to me that was I think that's what was the key factor of my team was I get a lot of people that can be versatile in many aspects. So
Yeah, for sure.
How are you feeling heading into the playoffs, man? I think Marcus and I are the only two teams you haven't been able to beat at least once this
I think I
season.
lost to Ian once.
Yeah, but you've played him more than once, right? I think you've probably
Yeah,
beat him once, lost once.
Yeah.
yeah.
And you have a better record, so you would have the tiebreaker.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, I'm very nervous actually because I
I'm
don't.
coming for you. I want you as the matchup.
It depends though. Like who are like me and Marcus have two buys. Like we're not playing next week, and you guys are. So like, what if you lose, Bryson?
I mean, there's certainly a chance. I think Ian's probably the team I'm most worried about. But if I end up playing either of like I think it'll be Gabe and Gavin that come in at like the fifth and sixth spot.
Mm,
Um, I'm not particularly worried. I think I'm beating Gabe 9-1 this week with
okay.
like quite a bit of injuries. With
Mm,
To be
Kevin Durant,
fair, yeah, he's missing LeBron, LaMelo, and Giannis.
he's got
that's
his
like three main players.
yeah, and Gavin's suffering from the same problems. He's got he's got Embiid, Cat, and AD as his kind of big three, and I don't know if he's had a single week where all those guys have played together. So,
Mm,
all of us, I think, this year have had to deal with way more like postponed games, injuries, rest, and all that kind of stuff. But some of us have just, Gabe and Gavin specifically, have been pretty ravaged, which is,
Yeah.
a tough position to be in, right? Because now you're coming in at the bottom of the playoffs, so you don't get the benefit of potentially landing as a high draft pick. You just kind of have to hope you get healthy at the right time. But this time of year, again, there's just so much rest and so many like nagging injuries that they're just making sure guys are sitting out as long as they need to for that. I don't know. It's going to be tough. It's going to be an interesting playoffs because I do think like it could go either way for a lot of us depending on who's healthy.
mm,
Yeah. Well, I look at my team and, I have three Charlotte Hornets on my roster. Actually, two now because Hayward's done for the fantasy season. But two Hornets, two Spurs, both of the Clippers stars, and then both of the Nuggets stars. And it's the kind of case where, especially with the Clippers and Nuggets, if something happens to one of those teams, if there's a COVID outbreak, postponements, I'm done. I can't have 2, 3 missed games a week from Jamal Murray, Jokic, Kawhi, or Paul George.
To be honest, I'm pretty like in a lot of ways pretty I mean, grateful on one hand and surprised on the other. We were talking about the Canucks earlier, which showed kind of the fragility of these sports leagues and what happens if the virus kind of infiltrates as it is prone to do. But overall, though there have been cases all throughout the NBA season, and you've seen guys, I mean, look at the Raptors. We had Siakam out for a long time, OG out. You had Freddie be out for a long time. I think, I don't want to give the NBA COVID credit, to be honest, because playing the season to begin with is sort of a questionable call. Not to say we haven't benefited from the entertainment value, but the fact that there hasn't been larger sort of team-wide breakouts like what's happening in the Canucks right now is knock on wood, but it's certainly something to talk about.
I think it is probably due in part to their regulations working as they're intended to, but probably to some degree also because the support staff and the team size is just so much smaller for a basketball team. So there's less opportunity, I guess, for it to spread.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So maybe it's a little bit of both, but either way, it's worked out pretty well. You saw tons of baseball teams that were impacted by it more heavily in the summer. That was one season that I was shocked that the NBA, or not the NBA, that the NFL and MLB went ahead and played their season pretty much unrestricted, aside from fans or limited capacity fans anyway.
Yeah, now they're coming back, and you got teams like the down in Texas playing with full stadiums, which is
that's scary.
That's what I think. That's the right word. I think I saw the pictures of the stadiums, and I was like, it made me a little like anxious just looking at the picture. We've been so conditioned to be on the lookout for this stuff, but to see 40,000 people crammed into the stands was just like, I was like getting cold sweats just looking at the picture.
For sure.
Well, I just feel like their vaccine per se. I think they're banking a lot on the vaccine, and that's why they're become very comfortable, because obviously America per capita of vaccine roll is more than us, like parts per million. But I would say I think they're overly too optimistic on the vaccine, and they're too comfortable, and then I think they're opening up too quickly for them to do any good. Like, yes, if you have like you've inoculated, it's fine, but what about the people that haven't got inoculated and stuff and still goes to these games, and how would they feel and stuff?
Well, exactly. If 40% of the population, and that number might be out of date, 40% of the eligible population has been vaccinated. What percentage of a stadium of 40,000 is that? How many people are going to be sitting near each other that aren't, or are going to be walking past each other, or in close quarters that aren't? I wish we were further ahead in that, but
well, I don't think in terms of the global power, the U.S. definitely has more power and more pull of getting vaccine than us. And plus, they have way more money than us, way more, let's say, more ammunition to throw at the vaccine, like way more money to throw at the vaccines than our government. Like, they have like a multi-trillion-dollar economy. We only have a couple $100 billion, so that's a big difference in terms of spending, right? So,
and domestic vaccine production facilities, which is the one thing that we definitely don't have.
Yeah,
they're in the UK, they're in the EU, they're in the US, but
we could have, like, there's obviously labs and stuff in Saskatchewan developing vaccines and stuff, but it's not a production warehouse like brick and mortar style, so we can get the volumes ready and stuff. Like right now we have to rely on other countries and stuff, and then I guess right now is who pays the highest bidder wins, or who has the most power wins.
It's an interesting situation where people, obviously I think people are right about the speed of the vaccine rollout. There's plenty of fair criticism to be levied across the board and across different provinces in particular. All of us are in Ontario. I think we've all got plenty of bones to pick. But at the same time, if you choose to look globally, the fact that we even have access to a vaccine right now is incredibly lucky. Like, you have parts of the world that haven't even received a shipment of doses yet, and of course, as it's prone to be, often developing nations that simply just can't afford to compete with like buying power of like the EU or Commonwealth countries, let alone the United States. And though they're starting to put together sort of global access vaccine, agreements and whatnot, they're saying like by the time the whole world's vaccinated, we could be looking at like 2024, 2025.
That's still going to be a
Yeah,
dangerous point on that, because there's a lot of African countries that don't have the resources to get the vaccines, and a lot of people are in poverty there per GDP, and I feel like they're going to be hit the worst in terms of this pandemic. Yeah.
actually, I've done a little bit of reading about that, and a lot of African countries haven't been hit quite as hard by it because, well, the ones anyway that have much younger populations. Europe and Canada, and just I don't know where the US fits, but parts of Europe that have been hit the hardest, Italy, France, Spain, have extremely old populations, some of the oldest in the world. So,
and then a country like the US has high comorbidities, right? They have higher rates of diabetes, high rates of obesity. Like, yeah, those risk factors, plus and an older population as well.
Yeah.
And you see those pretty horrifying death rates that they were seeing kind of like back
I've been seeing
over the
like
winter and last
controversy on the death rates. People are saying like, or doctors saying like, is it a COVID death if you have COVID in your system, or your death because of a heart attack? I'm not sure like how that works per se, because people are saying that the heart attack death, die of a heart attack, or count as COVID death, and not actual like death by like that. To me, that's a great question though. Like, did you die because of COVID, or did you die because of your underlying condition that caused by COVID? That's, to me,
this is a really good question, and one that's a good question if it comes from a place of curiosity, and not a good question if it comes from a place of like conspiracy land, people trying to like hide the deaths. The consensus globally is that the actual death rate is underestimated, given how long it took us to kind of figure out how this was spreading and what was going on. And the way that as I understand it, and I don't want to, my background's in like cross-disciplinary communication, so I have like some understanding of how to like, communicate scientific knowledge, but I don't want to position myself as a health expert necessarily. But I would think of myself as fairly well informed, but don't take this as like, the final word. But as I understand it, they are almost all COVID deaths if you have an underlying condition. And the sort of analogy that I've heard it as is if you have an underlying heart condition perhaps, or you have a bad, you're dealing with diabetes or health issues related to obesity, and you walk into traffic and get hit by a bus, it's the bus that killed you, not the underlying health conditions. And when you get COVID, it's COVID that's killing you. But of course it is exacerbating and making health conditions worse. And things like diabetes and things like, other comorbidities are obviously going to weaken your immune system and make it harder for you to fight that infection. And they're going to make you more susceptible to dying when you catch the virus.
I just wish that people can do more research on the topic and stuff, because like for people that never have like a underlying education on these topics and stuff, tend to go to a different mindset of thinking. And we're not very like, of course there is people that do like bad things, like raising up vaccine price like Pfizer and stuff, like in the past and stuff, like because I've seen a Pfizer exec raised up like a pill price to 130% and stuff. That's documented fact. But I feel like I want this to be I want this to be as much information as possible, as much fact checked as possible and stuff. Like, it's okay to ask questions, but I feel like we should be talking to experts, talking to not just the government, but like health experts. Like, everyone has to be in a round table to talk about this in order to get a better picture.
I think that's been one thing that I've noticed a lot, is sort of the shortcomings of science communication as it's related to the pandemic. But on another note, also the shortcomings of our education system to provide people with critical thinking skills. So I'm sure as you do too, and anyone listening to this, a lot of misinformation shared on social media that's from sources that aren't reputable or sources that are not respected or have been discredited within their fields. And people don't necessarily understand that. They don't have the tools, they're not provided with the tools in their education that allow them to evaluate those sources. They see information, and this is so much more of a concern with older generations, right? I've had this conversation with a couple family members where people will take a lot of things at face value because they would have grown up at a time when print media or television media was fairly reputable and had some level of accountability. And now anyone can make a YouTube channel and say anything.
Yeah.
But there's differences in the quality of media, and people aren't really able to evaluate that or are unwilling to evaluate it.
Something I've been starting to push back when people, you'll hear a common thing you'll hear is like, well, I don't trust the media, right? Or the media said this, or the media lied about that. And I think a question to ask people who tend to speak in those generalities is like, well, which media? Like, was it a particular news outlet? Did you read it in a specific newspaper? Was it from a particular online publication? Like, treating the media as a monolith is an incredibly poor way to understand like the share and spread of information. And if you're going to talk about it as like one giant thing, of course it's going to be imperfect, because then you're all the information just bundled into one big ball, and so then people tell themselves they can just treat it as like all of it is bad or all of it is good, though I think that's perhaps a less common stance. So I think a good prompting question, if you're having conversations with people who are perhaps sharing something that sounds a little bit suspect, or even like railing against the media, it's good to ask them, like, again, where did you hear that? Where did that piece of information come from? Do they know anything about that publication? Is it left leaning, right leaning, center, like in the middle? And to start, rather than attacking their position, have a conversation about like how information is shared and processed and where it comes from, and why lumping anything into a big homogenous blob of information is a poor way to sort of approach like knowledge and understanding.
I also
Absolutely,
want to point out that the rate of what should I say, of disseminating information online in the digital age is surpassing our laws. In a digital era, like how is the information being processed and stuff? How I read the news is I don't just go like towards just, let's say, CNN. I go to Fox News, CNN, NBC, and see what it's very interesting to see what positions they're leaning towards, to left or right or middle. And I think the answer is somewhere down the middle, unless there's not much information being brought to the news media, and always to be clear that information can be changed at any time as new updates coming. And people, just that to me is like, people don't understand that new information comes in and out anytime. Like what we say about COVID now might get changed with a new study tomorrow. We don't know that, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And the communication needs to be clear from different sources. I've noticed that, especially with the pandemic, that people will latch onto something that was said in late February of 2020 and say, well, this doctor was wrong about this, so nothing they say is acceptable to me. And that's sort of, I think there needs to be some sort of coordinated messaging between public health authorities and between different levels of government. I don't know if people will trust that or not, but I'm not sure exactly how you approach that.
And also, a lot of the news has turned, I don't know if the late president did this, but a lot of the news have turned, in terms of COVID, has turned into a political debate. And I feel like when we talk about as serious as COVID in terms of like updates and stuff, it should not be a political thing. It should be all sides coming together and literally say, what can we do? Because it affects everyone. Don't say, oh, one guy's trying to smother another, or trying to, like, as you hear in the news, like slam the other opposition. Instead of disagreeing with each other, why don't you guys bring it in? Like how the left and the right come in with GameStop and Robin Hood, right? Like people actually came into together and say this was the problem. Like left and right actually came into the and somehow collaborated. But why don't we have something like that and stuff? That's, to me, is just not like, because it's like, oh, when Trump said, oh, it's a Chinese virus or the Wuhan virus. It's not the word that's uh, disruptive towards a lot of the communities. It's the how you spin it in terms of it going towards your favor or not. Like that's also very important. It's like it's not the word, like, oh, like it's not racist to say, oh, it's the Wuhan virus. It's how you deliver the definition of that, and how you talk to public about it and stuff. And that, to me, is very important. Like I'm okay with saying the Chinese virus if it's not put any like serious political weight on it, right? So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure you've heard Spanish
yeah,
flu talked about, but it
yeah,
doesn't make you think anything less of Spain,
no,
right? Because it
no.
doesn't have any derogatory connotations associated with it.
Especially when China was having sanctions with the states at that specific time, like in the middle of it, that put it on a melting pot and stuff. Like I understand if it's come from China, say it's from China, right? But don't you're like, because that caused, like, you seeing videotapes of people being racist to Chinese people, like put online and say, oh, it's your virus, and just, to me, that's just unproductive. That's just
Oh, absolutely.
mhm.
I do think it's actually important that there's been a big push from that seems to have stuck for the most part outside of the odd political pandering here and there, but that people have emphasized calling it like SARS CoV-2 or some version of COVID-19 or what have you. I think emphasizing like sort of the science behind it is valuable. And in this age of like globalization, labeling it as like one country or another is just a moot point and a waste of time, because look how quickly it spread around the world. And it's, there's plenty of other, the Spanish flu is a good example. The Spanish flu didn't originate in Spain.
Yeah, no.
The labeling of it was basically a like deflection tactic.
Kansas, man,
Well, and
Kansas.
Exactly.
Spain was reporting numbers of deaths from a flu because they were neutral in the war.
Yeah.
So they didn't appear to be in a position of weakness that mattered in any practical sense. I also think it's, we know now that most of the cases of COVID that came to North America were from Europe anyway.
And I think
I would say some of it from China before it became an epidemic and stuff. A lot of travel, especially during the Chinese New Year. And there was a lot of traveling at that time, because that was the biggest traveling from Chinese people as a whole is the Chinese New Year's. And a lot of people are going home and stuff. A lot of transmission going around that time and stuff. And it could be like that too, like just the transmission of, because the first case that was caught in Canada was from a traveler from China that came back here and stuff. So like that's just fact, right? So
Yep. Actually, last February, I was in the Vancouver airport, and I remember that's just sort of when we were first thinking about it. And I read that afterwards that someone who had it and later tested positive had been in the airport the same day. And that was when we didn't know anything about it.
yeah.
And there was like a few days where I was kind of panicked, like, what if I get it? And obviously I didn't. But
One criticism I had with COVID as from a Canadian perspective is just how slow we ramp up anything in terms of in this country. Like I don't mind you flip flopping based on evidence. I'm just saying the speed of how we implement these policies, to me, is also a lagging indicator in our COVID response.
you brought up a good point earlier, Ming, and you said you mentioned sort of like the role of experts and how people listen to experts. And I think our lack of trust in experts or lack of listening to experts has been laid bare over the last year and a bit. I think, I understand that there are serious economical ramifications to consider, to consider. People's livelihood is extremely important. But if we look back now that we have the perspective of like 3 different waves of this thing, we look back to the first one, the sort of messaging from like epidemiologists, people who study these viruses, public health officials, has been pretty consistent from the get-go. And it's tough now for us in Ontario, being in the 3rd and worst wave yet, to not think back to the first one and be like, man, wouldn't it have been nice if we had just actually locked down and actually shut down and actually followed like the public health guidance that was being directed at us? Because now the suffering of small businesses, the suffering of people's livelihood has just been exacerbated and extended ad nauseum. And what we're seeing is like, we're at the point where regardless of what side of the political spectrum you sit on, everyone's mad at the government, because it doesn't matter if you're like a far left, far right, center, conservative, liberal, NDP, like whatever. I think the only consistency we've had in Ontario is full-blown incompetence from our leadership in addressing this and listening to expertise.
Yes,
Absolutely.
that's very important. Even nurses, we should listen to nurses who are literally, what should I say, like literally on the front line fighting this. Like I feel like lockdowns are important, but I feel like it's not. The government of Canada should learn from like Korea, like South Korea, how they first implement. I feel like because we have such a decent amount of time lag between the first cases in China, Korea, and Japan and stuff, they should really learn from these countries how they implement things. Maybe I know that Canada, it's a very big country and it's a very sometimes moving things can be not as fast as when you're talking about landmass with like Korea or Japan. But I feel like this could be done a little bit faster in terms of like listening to experts and stuff, and experts like Fauci have to go on like social media platforms to even get his message out, because at that specific time that he knows that the people are younger people are the most transmissible. And I feel like pandering to social media, like talking to like other news agencies and stuff alone, away from the political spectrum, actually helped a lot and stuff. And I don't see a lot of Canadian governments do that per se.
You brought up something, Ming, and this is I'll be honest, it's a bone I have to pick with some folks who are perhaps critical of some of the restrictions we've had in place. And there are plenty of extremely valid criticisms of this lockdown and its lack of effectiveness and how things have been handled. One thing I take issue with, and you may have heard people saying this or seen it on social media, is people talking about, the effects of the lockdown on people's mental well-being, right? Like lockdowns and not being able to see your friends and family are bad for our mental health. I think we can all agree that that's a fairly factual statement. And so there's now a line of argument from folks, we don't necessarily need to name names, but you'll see certain folks coming onto like social media or on the news saying like, we have to end the lockdown because of it's harming people's mental health, right? Talking about increased rates of suicide and addiction, which, again, there are like reasonable conversations to have about the effects. However, what about the mental health impacts on frontline healthcare workers? They've now done studies with people who are working in long-term care homes during the first wave, and for rates of up to 40% of people from long-term care facilities showing symptoms of PTSD. PTSD is a serious mental health condition that comes with many, many long-term effects. And so the disingenuousness, which I know isn't actually a word, of political pundits getting on camera and saying like, well, this is bad for people's mental health, without addressing the people who are suffering the most
Yeah.
and who are dealing with the highest amounts of stress and the highest amounts of burnout and like dealing with death and disease in front of their eyes every single day is something that bothers me quite a lot as someone who does care about mental health. And to reduce the conversation to lockdown bad, lockdown good is just such a dismissal of any sort of nuance and like productive conversation that can be had about these kinds of things.
The real productive conversation that we should be having is how do we work together as a country to stop the virus from spreading.
Yeah.
And that's the real productive it's having. And I feel like the answer is not about vaccines as a whole. It's about people working together as a whole. A lot of countries like Australia and New Zealand went on full lockdown because people understand the seriousness of the lockdown and stuff, and then now they're okay. I would say that we should learn from these countries, but there's a lot of too many, and the core issues is me. This is me, my freedoms and stuff. I would say
And
there's no freedom when there's no people to be free at.
well, and also in Canada, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, you says that your freedoms end when they begin to infringe on someone else's.
Yeah. So like,
But I mean, I wanted to add to Bryson's point that yes, of course, addiction and mental health and suicide rates are a big issue, but how many additional deaths will there be from ICU beds being taken up by COVID patients that are there, I think, unnecessarily because of inadequate action that's been taken? And how many non-emergency surgeries or cancer screenings or things like that have been deferred, in some cases indefinitely? So what's the long-term health impact of that going to be? How does that compare?
And it's an interesting, I've seen that angle taken by kind of, again, this anti-lockdown camp of saying, well, what about cancer screenings and what about this? And, you know, what about essential, you know, disease monitoring that's going to be missed, right? And the subsequent deaths. And what's confusing about that line of reasoning is it's like, well, that's because there's a deadly virus ravaging the country and we have a political system that did not prepare our health system to handle it, and we missed our chance repeatedly to like deal with this in an efficient way. So to say like the lockdown is the problem is just fundamentally missing the point. I am someone who is waiting for a non-essential surgery. I'm lucky that it's like a knee ligament like repair, which is probably about as low down the severity list as you could possibly go, right? But it's like, I don't blame the lockdown for that. I blame the fact that our health system has now been overloaded with COVID for 56 weeks straight and that we haven't been able to do anything about it.
Absolutely. Like,
I really like that point. It's like the faster we get this done, the more of these lagging indicators gets for like your injury and stuff, right? To me it's just I from a perspective of someone that's came from both countries. Like I'm a Canadian citizen now, and I came from China and stuff. From a perspective, I feel like we need to learn a lot more about how to work as a team. It's not just about me, and I feel like that's the most important issue. Like we've been in Canada and in the West has been privileged with this much freedoms for so long, and we're just taking it for granted. And COVID shows us how we are so privileged and take everything for granted as it is. We just want a one go solution like a vaccine as it is, but it's way too much complicated than that. For many people it might be, but I respect your points on mental health issues and stuff. Like this lockdown has been not good on anyone's mental health, and we should actually have a multi governmental panel onto, like, not saying there isn't, but I feel like the response from this panel, and I feel like one more thing is just that we need to live stream these meetings, like not just their announcement, but what do they do behind closed doors, see what are they actually talking about.
Oh God, I
And
would love to see Doug Ford operating behind closed doors.
yeah, and also as a joke, I want to see like how NASCAR drivers have logos of their sponsors on their. I want to see each and every single politician wear their logos of their corporations that or whatever they sponsor from them, and see where is the money going, where is the policy going and stuff.
Well, I think we know where the money's going in Ontario, and the policy's already headed in that direction. I won't talk too much about it because
Mm,
I just don't want to go down that road, but I think we know that at least provincially.
mm,
Mhm. Ming, you make a good point, and I think you're sort of touching on like one of the perhaps most fundamental issues we've seen over the course of this pandemic. And I think to put sort of the government response to the side, because it's been covered
yeah, over and over and
ad
over.
nauseum. Like I said, there's not a single side of the political spectrum that isn't just hurling insults at the provincial government at this point. But you bring up a sort of more like a human centered or human grounded issue, which is, you know, the perhaps the lack, if you will, of collectivism that we've seen over the course of this. You've seen the memes or the comics that say like, you know, we're not all in this together, and it's like we're in the same, you know, I think it said we're in the same storm but we're in very different boats, and there's a picture of, you know, a working class person in a little dinghy, and then up on a big cruise ship you've got like a wealthy person suntanning. And I
Yeah.
think there's a woman named Lauren Bristow who's an infectious disease specialist in the States, I think in somewhere in Atlanta. And she was interviewed in Harper's Bazaar, and she's kind of emerged as an Instagram figure, educating people about vaccines and the virus. She does a really good job of taking, again, very complex concepts and distilling them down into like Instagram stories and graphics and whatnot. And so she was interviewed in Harper's Bazaar, and she said, you know, the hardest part about this pandemic has been convincing people they should care about others. And it's amazing to me that people don't seem to see this as like a potential for like collective action and an opportunity to sort of contribute to something much greater than yourself. And I mean, you know, that's been true since the beginning. Again, I think we've never been in a situation where your specific individual actions can so clearly impact negatively or positively a large other group of people, your community, your city, and even your country. And now we're seeing again with vaccines. And you guys both follow me on Instagram. Occasionally I'll put up questions, you know, asking people, will you get the vaccine? Or how do you feel about the vaccine? Just out of my own general curiosity. These are not scientific polls by any means. But the one I've been thinking about doing lately that I may do in the next few days is, do you feel like you have a social responsibility to get the vaccine? Because I was thinking about it for myself, and like, obviously I want the vaccine. I don't want to get COVID. But I also think part of my motivation and part of a lot of people's motivation for getting it is to stop being a source of transmission. Like, I want to get it so that I can help people around me stay healthy, and also so that I can help my friggin' city come back to life, and like I can have a normal existence again. And the people that are critical of it, I just think are completely missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah, that's a great point. Even put more simply, so you can safely see a grandparent or a loved one who might have cancer or be immunocompromised in some way. By not getting the vaccine, you're directly putting someone like that at risk. And I would say it is a social responsibility. I would be interested to see what the collective thinking about that is now versus when something like the polio vaccine first came out. I wonder how that's changed.
I would say
Yeah,
we
it's a
should
really interesting question.
compare that with the Spanish flu, like because in Spanish flu there was two cities that took two separate approach towards the pandemic of the Spanish flu, and one city took the open everything up way, and then one city took the lockdown way. I think it's one of them is Philadelphia, and then
St. Louis and Philadelphia.
yeah, and one was the lockdown way and enforcing mask, and there was a sign that say mask up or go to jail, literally. And that was, to me, it was that answers one of your questions about collectivity and stuff, on how one city chooses to work together and one city to open up and stuff. That's like a textbook
Yeah.
example and stuff.
Even on a larger scale, some of those, there's a lot of West or Eastern countries, Japan and Korea specifically. I'm not sure about China. Maybe you might be able to provide some insight here. But they already have a strong culture of wearing masks when you're sick, and
Yeah,
it's
same.
a collective action.
Yeah, it's the same.
So you notice they've been,
Like they've been wearing masks. Like I know for a fact that people
Ming's
wear
frozen.
masks.
I lost Ming.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Are we back yet? Are we back?
We're good.
Okay, so I'll cut that out. So
We're back.
Yeah. But what I was thinking is mask is worn as a courtesy to other people. Like mask is seen in Asian cultures as a courtesy to protect other people. I'm respecting your right. Like not just like for the pandemic, but for any kind of flu season and stuff. Like as a common social courtesy, like respect is very important
Sure.
in Asian culture and stuff. And you've seen people like mask fashion was the first in Asian cultures, like Japan and Korea and in China and stuff. And that's to show respect that. Anyways, I think this is the end of the podcast. I want to thank Marcus Madalena and Bryson McLachlan to be on the show. To talk about different topic from basketball to fantasy basketball to COVID as a whole. Thank you for your time, guys, for coming on. I'll share your social media when I edit this post. And see you on the next episode. Bye.
Thanks for having us, Ming.
Thanks, Ming. It's always a pleasure.
It's always we should do it.